On January 27, 2020, an 11-year-old boy vanished from his own home. His stepmother stood before cameras crying, begging the world to help find him. But behind those tears was a truth far darker than anyone imagined. What if the person asking for help was the person hiding the crime? This is the story of Gannon Stauch, a child who trusted the wrong person. A story of lies layered upon lies. Of a stepmother who didn't just lose a child, she destroyed him. Tonight we uncover how a mother's role turned into a monster's mask, and how the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way to the surface. Letecia Stauch was once seen as an ordinary woman, living a quiet suburban life in Colorado Springs. She was married to Barry Barry Stauch, a U.S. Army serviceman, and together, they lived with Barry's 2 children from a previous relationship, including 11-year-old Gannon Stauch. To outsiders, Letecia presented herself as educated, soft-spoken, and deeply religious. She often spoke about faith, motherhood, and family values on social media, portraying the image of a caring stepmother. Gannon Stauch was described as a kind, gentle child who struggled with some developmental and emotional challenges. Despite this, he was known to be loving and respectful. In January 2020, Barry Stauch left town for National Guard training in Oklahoma, leaving Letecia alone at home with Gannon and his younger sister. That short period would change everything forever. On January 27, 2020, Letecia reported Gannon missing. She claimed that Gannon had left the house in the afternoon to visit a friend and never returned. Panic spread quickly. The El Paso County Sheriff's Office launched a massive search operation involving law enforcement, volunteers, dogs, and helicopters. Letecia appeared before cameras, tearfully pleading for Gannon's safe return. She gave interviews, describing him as a sweet boy who loved video games and had no reason to run away. However, almost immediately, investigators noticed inconsistencies in her story. Surveillance footage contradicted her claims. Video from a neighbor's security camera showed Letecia leaving the house with Gannon on the morning of January, but returning alone hours later. This raised serious concerns. Despite the growing suspicion, Letecia continued to insist that Gannon had disappeared on his own. She claimed that he had been abducted or harmed by someone else. She even alleged that a man had broken into the home and assaulted Gannon, a story that would later be proven false. Each version of her story became more complicated than the last. As days passed with no sign of Gannon, hope slowly turned into fear. The community was devastated. Candlelight vigils were held, and social media filled with prayers and messages asking for Gannon's safe return. Meanwhile, investigators quietly shifted focus from a missing child case to a potential homicide. Behind closed doors, detectives began building a timeline. They discovered that Gannon had suffered a severe injury inside the home the night before he disappeared. Evidence pointed not to an accident, but to something far more sinister. The smiling stepmother on television was quickly becoming the prime suspect. This was only the beginning of a horrifying story that would shock the nation. As the investigation into Gannon Stauch's disappearance intensified, Letecia Stauch's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She gave multiple interviews, each time changing critical details. At one point, she claimed Gannon had knocked over a candle, causing a fire in his bedroom, and that he was injured accidentally. Later, she suggested that Gannon had been attacked by a stranger. None of her explanations matched the physical evidence found in the house. Investigators discovered bloodstains in Gannon's bedroom. The amount of blood suggested a serious injury, far more severe than what Letecia had described. Forensic testing later confirmed that the blood belonged to Gannon. Even more disturbing was the fact that Letecia had attempted to clean the scene, indicating an effort to conceal what had happened. Text messages and internet searches retrieved from Letecia's phone raised additional red flags. She had searched for terms related to blood cleanup, false alibis, and even how to report a missing child. These searches painted a picture of premeditation rather than panic. Letecia also tried to manipulate those around her. She sent messages pretending to be Gannon, attempting to convince family members that he was still alive. She contacted Barry repeatedly, offering conflicting stories about their son's whereabouts. Barry, devastated and confused, initially believed his wife, but as the truth slowly emerged, his trust shattered. The pressure mounted when law enforcement publicly announced that Gannon's disappearance was being treated as a criminal investigation. Letecia's calm facade began to crack. She accused police officers of harassment and racism, claiming she was being targeted unfairly. Yet every new piece of evidence only deepened suspicion. Surveillance footage, digital data, and witness testimony all pointed toward one conclusion. Letecia was lying. She was not protecting Gannon, she was protecting herself. Behind the scenes, investigators believed Gannon had been severely abused and killed inside the home. The question was no longer if Letecia was responsible, but how and why. What had driven a stepmother to commit such an unthinkable act? As Letecia prepared to flee Colorado, authorities moved quickly. They tracked her movements and monitored her communications. She believed she could escape justice, but the net was closing fast. The truth was unraveling, and Letecia's web of lies was about to collapse completely. On March 2, 2020, Letecia Stauch was arrested in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She had fled Colorado with Gannon's younger sister, an act that further alarmed authorities. Letecia was charged with first-degree murder, child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased body, and false reporting. The charges were shocking, but what followed was even worse. Months after Gannon disappeared, his remains were discovered in a suitcase near a bridge in Pace, Florida, over 1,500 miles away from his home. Investigators concluded that Letecia had transported his body across several states in an attempt to permanently hide her crime. The suitcase contained heartbreaking evidence of extreme violence. Gannon had suffered multiple stab wounds, blunt force trauma, and a gunshot wound. The autopsy confirmed investigators' worst fears. Gannon had endured prolonged suffering before his death. The injuries were not consistent with an accident or a single moment of rage. They told a story of sustained abuse. As this information became public, national outrage erupted. The case gained widespread media attention, with many questioning how such brutality could occur behind closed doors without anyone noticing. Letecia's carefully constructed image was completely destroyed. In jail, Letecia continued to exhibit bizarre behavior. She wrote letters blaming everyone but herself, including law enforcement, Barry, and even Gannon. She claimed she was being framed and that another personality had committed the crime, a claim that would later play a key role in her defense strategy. Despite her claims, prosecutors believed the evidence was overwhelming. Digital records, forensic findings, surveillance footage, and Letecia's own contradictory statements formed a powerful case against her. The stage was set for a trial that would be as disturbing as it was unforgettable. As the trial of Letecia Stauch began, the courtroom quickly became the stage for one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent American history. Prosecutors laid out a clear narrative of abuse, murder, and deception. But Letecia's defense team took a shocking approach. They claimed she was not guilty by reason of insanity. According to the defense, Letecia suffered from dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. They argued that at the time of Gannon's murder, Letecia was not in control of her actions. Instead, an alternate personality, separate from her conscious self, had committed the crime. This claim stunned the courtroom and immediately drew intense public scrutiny. Mental health experts were called to testify. Court-appointed psychologists evaluated Letecia over an extended period. Their findings contradicted the defense's claims. While Letecia did show signs of personality disorders and manipulative behavior, experts testified that she was fully aware of her actions before, during, and after the crime. Her attempts to clean blood, fabricate stories, and dispose of Gannon's body demonstrated planning, not dissociation. Prosecutors emphasized this point relentlessly. They argued that Letecia's actions after the murder were the strongest proof of her sanity. She lied to police, staged false narratives, impersonated Gannon via text messages, and transported his body across state lines. These were not the actions of someone detached from reality. They were the actions of someone trying to escape accountability. One of the most unsettling moments of the trial came when recordings of Letecia's police interviews were played in court. In these videos, she appeared to speak in different voices and claim different identities. Prosecutors argued that these performances were calculated, attempts to confuse investigators and manipulate the system. The jury also heard emotional testimony from law enforcement officers, forensic experts, and Gannon's family members. Each witness added another layer to the devastating picture of what Gannon endured in his final hours. The courtroom atmosphere was heavy with grief and anger. Throughout the trial, Letecia showed little visible remorse. At times she appeared detached, at other moments defensive and hostile. The jury was tasked with separating mental illness from manipulation, a difficult but crucial responsibility. As closing arguments approached, one question remained at the heart of the case. Was Letecia Stauch criminally insane, Or was she a calculating killer hiding behind a false diagnosis? After weeks of testimony and days of deliberation, the jury reached its decision. In May 2023, Letecia Stauch was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased body, and false reporting. The insanity defense was completely rejected. The verdict brought a wave of emotion through the courtroom. Gannon's family wept quietly, holding on to one another as years of pain finally reached a moment of justice. Prosecutors described the decision as a victory for truth and accountability. For many watching across the nation, it was confirmation that overwhelming evidence had prevailed. Sentencing followed soon after, and it was one of the most powerful moments of the entire case. The judge addressed Letecia directly, describing her actions as heinous, cruel, and beyond comprehension. He emphasized the suffering Gannon endured and the deliberate choices Letecia made at every stage of the crime. Letecia was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, along with additional consecutive sentences for related charges. The judge made it clear she would never walk free again. Victim impact statements left the courtroom in tears. Gannon's loved ones spoke about his kindness, his innocence, and the future that was stolen from him. They described a boy who loved video games, laughter, and spending time with family. Their words painted a picture of the life Gannon should have had, a life cut brutally short. Letecia listened as these statements were read. Observers noted her lack of visible emotion, a stark contrast to the heartbreak surrounding her. For many, this only reinforced the perception of her cruelty. Outside the courtroom, the case sparked national conversations about child abuse, false insanity defenses, and the warning signs of domestic violence. Many asked how such extreme abuse could occur without intervention, and what systems could be improved to protect vulnerable children. While no verdict could ever bring Gannon back, the sentencing marked the end of Letecia's control and deception. Justice, though delayed, had finally been served. The conclusion of the Letecia Stauch trial did not bring closure. It brought reflection. While the legal system delivered justice, the emotional aftermath of Gannon Stauch's murder continued to ripple far beyond the courtroom. His death became more than a criminal case. It became a national symbol of hidden abuse, manipulation, and the devastating consequences of unchecked violence within the home. In Colorado Springs, the community that once searched desperately for a missing boy now mourned him. Memorials, vigils, and messages of remembrance appeared across the city. Gannon was remembered as gentle, kind-hearted, and vulnerable, a child who trusted the adults responsible for protecting him. His story resonated deeply because it challenged a dangerous assumption: that danger always comes from strangers. In Gannon's case, it came from someone inside his home. The case also forced uncomfortable conversations about child welfare. Many questioned how warning signs were missed and whether intervention could have saved Gannon's life. Experts emphasized that children with special needs or emotional challenges are particularly vulnerable to abuse, especially in blended family situations. Advocacy groups called for stronger monitoring systems, better reporting mechanisms, and greater awareness of emotional and physical abuse. Another major impact of the case was its influence on how courts and the public view insanity defenses. Letecia Stauch's false claims of dissociative identity disorder drew attention to the misuse of mental health diagnoses in criminal trials. Psychologists and legal professionals stressed that true mental illness should never be confused with manipulation or deceit. The verdict reinforced the principle that accountability cannot be avoided through fabricated disorders. For law enforcement, the case stood as an example of methodical investigation. Despite lies, false leads, and deliberate obstruction, investigators followed evidence step by step. Digital data, surveillance footage, forensic analysis, and behavioral patterns ultimately revealed the truth. The case demonstrated how persistence and science can cut through deception. Gannon's family continues to honor his memory. They have spoken publicly about their grief, their pain, and their hope that sharing Gannon's story will help protect other children. His name has become associated not only with tragedy, but with awareness and change. Letecia Stauch now spends her life behind prison walls. Her attempts at control and manipulation permanently ended. Her sentence ensures that she will never harm another child. But prison bars cannot undo what was done. Gannon Stauch's life was short, but his impact is lasting. He is remembered not for the violence inflicted upon him, but for the innocence he represented. His story serves as a warning and a promise that the truth will surface, that justice matters, and that the voices of vulnerable children must never be ignored. This is not just the end of a crime story. It is the legacy of a child who deserved safety, love, and a future.